The first 20 hours summary, review and book notes. What is rapid skill acquisition? Rapid skill acquisition is a process, a way of breaking down the skill you're trying to acquire into the smallest possible parts, identifying which of those parts are most important, then deliberately practicing those elements first. It's as simple as that. Rapid skill acquisition has 4 major steps: deconstructing a skill into the smallest possible subskills, learning enough about each subskill to be able to practice intelligently and self-correct during practice, removing physical, mental, and emotional barriers that get in the way of practice, practicing the most important subskills for at least 20 hours. That's it. Rapid skill acquisition is not rocket science. You simply decide what to practice, figure out the best way to practice, make time to practice, then practice until you reach your target level of performance. Skill acquisition versus training. There's also a huge difference between skill acquisition and training. Training, in this context, means improving a skill you've already acquired through repetition. It's what happens after you've acquired a basic skill if you want to keep improving. Training and learning will certainly make it easier to finish the race, but they're not skill acquisition. Without a certain amount of skill acquisition, training isn't possible or useful. Preparation and conditioning can make some forms of skill acquisition easier, but they can never replace practice. Relearning how to run at a basic level, however, is skill acquisition. The 3-stage model of skill acquisition: cognitive, early stage, understanding what you're trying to do, researching, thinking about the process, and breaking the skill into manageable parts. Associative, intermediate stage, practicing the task, noticing environmental feedback, and adjusting your approach based on that feedback. Autonomous, late stage, performing the skill effectively and efficiently without thinking about it or paying unnecessary attention to the process. The principles of rapid skill acquisition. Choose a lovable project. Focus your energy on one skill at a time. Define your target performance level. Deconstruct the skill into subskills. Obtain critical tools. Eliminate barriers to practice. Make dedicated time for practice. Create fast feedback loops. Practice by the clock in short bursts. Emphasize quantity and speed. 1. Choosing a lovable project. The best thing that can happen to a human being is to find a problem, to fall in love with that problem, and to live trying to solve that problem, unless another problem even more lovable appears. If you want a formula for living a satisfying, productive life, you can't go wrong with that one. In practice, finding a lovable project is a very individual matter. For example, learning to speak and write Mandarin Chinese is not on my current list of skills to acquire because I have no urgent need to learn it at the moment, and I have a lot of other projects I'm more interested in tackling. If I decide to move to a Mandarin-speaking part of China in the future, it may become lovable, but I'm not there yet. On the other hand, I'm intensely interested in learning how to play Go, the world's oldest strategic board game, which originated in China more than 3,000 years ago. It's a beautiful game, and I've wanted to learn how to play since I stumbled across it years ago. If you focus on acquiring your prime skill, that is, your most lovable project, before anything else, you'll acquire it in far less time. 2. Focusing energy on one skill. One of the easiest mistakes to make when acquiring new skills is attempting to acquire too many skills at the same time. It's a matter of simple math. Acquiring new skills requires a critical mass of concentrated time and focused attention. If you only have an hour or 2 each day to devote to practice and learning, and you spread that time and energy across 20 different skills, no individual skill is going to receive enough time and energy to generate noticeable improvement. Pick one, and only one, new skill you wish to acquire. Put all of your spare focus and energy into acquiring that skill, and place other skills on temporary hold. David Allen, author of Getting Things Done, 2002, recommends establishing what he calls a someday maybe list. A list of things you may want to explore sometime in the future, but that aren't important enough to focus on right now. By adding an item to the list, you're temporarily absolving yourself of responsibility for acting or thinking about the idea until you decide to promote it to active status. I can't emphasize this enough. Focusing on one prime skill at a time is absolutely necessary for rapid skill acquisition. You're not giving up on the other skills permanently. You're just saving them for later. 3. Defining the target performance level. A target performance level is a simple sentence that defines what good enough looks like. How well would you like to be able to perform the skill you're acquiring? Your target performance level is a brief statement of what your desired level of skill looks like. Think of it as a single sentence description of what you're trying to achieve, and what you'll be able to do when you're done. The more specific your target performance level is, the better. Defining your target performance level helps you imagine what it looks like to perform in a certain way. Once you determine exactly how good you want or need to be, it's easier to figure out how to get there. In the words of Charles Kettering, the inventor of the electric automobile ignition system, a problem well stated is a problem half solved. How you define your target performance level depends on why you chose to acquire the skill in the first place. If your intent is to have fun, your target is the point at which you stop feeling frustrated and start enjoying the practice itself. If your intent is to perform, what's the minimum level of performance you're willing to accept at first? Once you reach your initial target performance level, you can always choose to keep going if you wish. The best target performance levels seem just out of reach, not out of the realm of possibility. As a rule, the more relaxed your target performance level, the more rapidly you can acquire the associated skill. If you're operating under a world-class mastery mindset, this may feel like cheating. You're just lowering the bar so you can win faster, right? That's exactly what we're doing. And it's not cheating. Remember, world-class mastery is not the end point of rapid skill acquisition. We're shooting for capacity and sufficiency at maximum speed, not perfection. 4. Deconstructing the skill into subskills. Most of the things we think of as skills are actually bundles of smaller subskills. Once you've identified a skill to focus on, the next step is to deconstruct it, to break it down into the smallest possible parts. For example, playing golf is a skill that has many subcomponents. Choosing the correct club, driving off the tee, hitting out of a bunker, putting, etc. Once the skill is deconstructed sufficiently, it's much easier to identify which subskills appear to be most important. By focusing on the critical subskills first, you'll make more progress with less effort. Deconstructing a skill also makes it easier to avoid feeling overwhelmed. You don't have to practice all parts of a skill at the same time. Instead, it's more effective to focus on the subskills that promise the most dramatic overall returns. Deconstructing the skill before you begin also allows you to identify the parts of the skill that aren't important for beginning practitioners. By eliminating the non-critical subskills or techniques early in the process, you'll be able to invest more of your time and energy mastering the critical subskills first. 6. Eliminating barriers to practice. There are many things that can get in the way of practice, which makes it much more difficult to acquire any skill. These barriers can be anything from significant pre-practice effort, such as misplacing your tools, not acquiring the correct tools before practicing, or skipping setup requirements. Intermittent resource availability, such as using borrowed equipment or relying on a resource that has limited operating hours. Environmental distractions, such as television, ringing phones, and incoming email. Emotional blocks, such as fear, doubt, and embarrassment. Every single one of these elements makes it harder to start practicing, and therefore decreases your acquisition speed. Relying on willpower to consistently overcome these barriers is a losing strategy. We only have so much willpower at our disposal each day, and it's best to use that willpower wisely. The best way to invest willpower in support of skill acquisition is to use it to remove these soft barriers to practice. By rearranging your environment to make it as easy as possible to start practicing, you'll acquire the skill in far less time. 7. Making time for practice. You have 24 hours to invest each day. 440 minutes. No more or less. You will never have more time. If you sleep approximately 8 hours a day, you have 16 hours at your disposal. Some of those hours will be used to take care of yourself and your loved ones. Others will be used for work. Whatever you have left over is the time you have for skill acquisition. If you want to improve your skills as quickly as possible, the larger the dedicated blocks of time you can set aside, the better. The best approach to making time for skill acquisition is to identify low-value uses of time, then choose to eliminate them. As an experiment, I recommend keeping a simple log of how you spend your time for a few days. All you need is a notebook. The results of this time log will surprise you. If you make a few tough choices to cut low-value uses of time, you'll have much more time for skill acquisition. The more time you have to devote each day, the less total time it will take to acquire new skills. I recommend making time for at least 90 minutes of practice each day by cutting low-value activities as much as possible. I also recommend pre-committing to completing at least 20 hours of practice. Once you start, you must keep practicing until you hit the 20-hour mark. If you get stuck, keep pushing. You can't stop until you reach your target performance level or invest 20 hours. If you're not willing to invest at least 20 hours up front, choose another skill to acquire. The reason for this is simple. The early parts of the skill acquisition process usually feel harder than they really are. You're often confused, and you'll run into unexpected problems and barriers. Instead of giving up when you experience the slightest difficulty, pre-committing to 20 hours makes it easier to persist. Think of this approach as an exercise in grit. You're not going to let some silly little issues stop you from doing what you've decided you really want to do. You'll either solve the problem, or do your best until you reach the 20-hour mark. At that point, you'll be in a better position to decide how to proceed. 8. Creating feedback loops. Fast feedback means getting accurate information about how well you're performing as quickly as possible. The longer it takes to get accurate feedback, the longer it will take to acquire the skill. Fast feedback naturally leads to rapid skill acquisition. If feedback arrives immediately, or with a very short delay, it's much easier to connect that information to your actions and make the appropriate adjustments. The more sources of fast feedback you integrate into your practice, the faster you'll acquire the skill,